engine that could.
Choo choo. Like major, major pain.
Toot toot.
Toot toot. Hey, welcome to another episode of Real Talk, and I am your host, Pastor K, and
I am Henry Roman Sr. Esquire. Cardo? No. I thought it'd sound nice. My mom said it was cool.
You're not. Your mom lied to you.
Yeah, she needs glasses.
She probably also said you were handsome.
Yeah, bifocals.
No focal.
I know, right? She's like, you remember the people used to have the glasses with no lens in them? That's what she's got.
That's the only time she probably ever said you were handsome.
He's amazing.
He's great.
If I don't know where he is.
He's here somewhere.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out later.
Mm-hmm. She calls me Blinky.
All right, so I do want to take this time and this opportunity to do a quick announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do an announcement. December 1st, keep an eye out on our Facebook page. There is something dropping on December 1st. Maybe.
Maybe.
Except they didn't see it because your hand wasn't in the frame. Not like that kind of drop. But anyways, we do have something dropping on December 1st. I am very excited. As long as nothing happens, no issues, XYZ.
No, you want something to happen. You want the drop.
Well, we don't want the issues to take place to prevent the drop.
Okay. No parachute.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So anyways, please keep an eye out, stay informed on our Facebook page, facebook.com/OneDigitalChurch.
Yeah, what he said.
So, but anyways, with that being said, please subscribe to this video or to this channel. That way you can be informed of every time a video drops.
Yep.
Or will be dropping, and we can kind of keep this community growing.
Yeah. Keep the train rolling. Something like that. Little engine that could.
Choo choo. Like major pain.
That's a terrible.
It is.
That movie is something.
But yeah, subscribe, share this channel.
Yeah.
Help us get the word out there, because that's essentially all we're here for, right?
Pretty much.
That's right. You're gonna answer your yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's right. Anyways, but with that being said, Henry, what are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we're gonna discuss the new creation.
I don't understand.
Because you're not new.
You saying I'm old? I just want to say you're a little older than I am.
Yeah, more than a little. If I cough, dust comes out.
Cover your mouth when you cough, kid.
Well, we're talking about the new creation. Basically, it's going to be from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 17 through 18. And it's just talking about the new creation, a person that's now come to Christ and has become a new believer, and how the old stuff is supposed to pass away and a man's made new. And so let's just get into it. Let's read it. So then, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. What is old has passed away. Look, what is new has come. And these things are from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ, and who has given us the ministry of reconciliation. And I want to take this in a direction of this, and though many of the people that may see this may already be believers, there's some people that hopefully and this is the hope. The hope is always that if we reach people that are non-believers, because we really want to bring people into the fold of Christ and knowing Christ the way we do. But the question I want to pose to believers that are already existing is, do we really put weight to what is said in this passage, that now that we are in Christ, are we really embracing the old man being, in a sense, buried, and allowing the new man that is in Christ, the new woman that is in Christ, to flourish and to start rising up and taking over that spot? Are we sweeping out those areas within ourselves to become new?
Well, so I think part of the issue is, one, understanding something that's a hard concept to grasp, is that just because you're made new doesn't mean you should ever forget.
Yeah, true that.
And I think that's sometimes the hardest thing for us to realize as new believers, when we come to Christ and we become that new creation, is your past is still there. Now, it's been forgiven, but that doesn't mean you have to forget it.
Well, it's kind of like the thief on the cross. I mean, he became a believer, and it didn't change the fact that he was still on the cross being crucified. But now his soul was saved.
Yes. And the terrible things that we've done, because we've all done these terrible things. I mean, I still do these terrible things half the time, or at least I feel like I do.
Yeah, the Paul thing.
So, but it comes down to it is, that's your journey.
Right.
And just like in the New Testament, when Paul's talking to the church, he talks about this sense of running a race. Mm-hmm. And in order to start the race, you had to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. You had to have a beginning. Yeah. And he didn't halfway through the race forget where he was. Mm-hmm. He didn't halfway through the race.
Right, 'cause then he just turned around, run the other direction. He's still running.
He didn't. Yeah, he didn't sit there and wait like, whoa.
Ooh, hot dog! You're running the stands.
and then turn back and run the other in the back to the direction he came, because he knew that was the old him. He knew that was the old part, and I think as new believers, we need to understand that when we come to Christ, we are new. So we're pointed towards a finish line.
Right.
And we don't want to run back to the way that we were. We don't want to run back to the old me, old Kyle.
Hence the term backsliding.
Yes.
And that's why that analogy works, is because it totally speaks to going away from the finish line, going back to the starting point. And I find, and this is something, maybe it's just me, but sometimes I'm reluctant to embrace that new man, because it's hard, because now I got to make changes.
And the other, you want to know what one of the things that I notice is hard is, one, keeping an eye on the camera when
I know, yeah.
We have a screen below the camera, and we keep on constantly looking down.
Just think of us looking at your feet.
Right? That's because our heads are down. We're just sad.
That Pumas?
But the one thing that I think that I've come to grasp with, and this is maybe the hardest thing for me, is I don't want to mess up the new.
Yeah, you don't want to spoil the new.
So I keep on living in this old sometimes because I feel that, okay, if I stay in the old, I can't destroy the new.
And the new can be a fearful place because it's unknown, right? If you haven't been there yet, I mean, what if God says that you're to do this grand thing?
What if God says that I'm supposed to take all my friends, which wouldn't be hard, it'd just be Henry, and tell him, you know what, I got to kick you to the curb because you don't fit into the plan that God has for me.
Yeah.
That's not saying that God doesn't have a plan for you. That could just
Yeah.
be that the plan that I have
It's for personal growth.
is it's detrimental for both of us to be together because of whatever reason. And this is my way of saying, Henry, that you're no longer welcome on the show.
Well, thanks.
You're fired.
I can do other stuff now. Now I can really embrace the old guy.
I haven't fired you in a long time.
I know.
No, I'm not firing Henry, and I'm not kicking Henry to the curb. But if God had a plan that Henry just happened to not be in, or if God had a plan for Henry that I just
And you
happened to
send
not
the
be
guy
in,
off for the blessing.
and
That's the model.
and that's just it. You send them off and you tell them, hey, you know what? Like, if we're true friends and we're true believers in Christ, and it may hurt, that separation may hurt, but essentially we should do it for the growth of each other.
It'd be like you taking a part of you away.
I'll leave. I'll give you my hat.
I don't want it now. But and the one thing that I think about too is that unknown sometimes is such a challenge that it causes us to live at a steady plane. And the one thing that, if we look at Scripture, the one thing that God hates is the lukewarm.
Like, I'm just happy Becca didn't get that call before we got married. Or she didn't listen to that. Let me rephrase that. She didn't listen to that call before we got married.
I know.
So then by the time that we got married, it was already too late. She was
now.
stuck with me. Because otherwise, she would have known a long time ago, like, lose the guy. Run as fast as you can. Like, at that altar, you should have been wearing Nike running shoes and out that door.
She should have been running track spikes.
Right? Yeah, have a block set at the altar.
You'd have heard this.
Yeah, true that.
She flying. She like FloJo.
Usain Bolt ain't got nothing.
Got nothing on her. Bo don't know nothing. But to me, that's the thing. It's like I find myself sometimes being stagnant because, and just to be honest, sometimes it's a method of fear because, like you said, you don't want to mess up the new thing that, or this grand scheme that you heard that might be possible for your life, for a ministry that you're supposed to head, for a said thing that you're supposed to do. Like you always say, insert whatever thing in that box. So sometimes the fear of seeing that and knowing what all of that will take sometimes causes you to have, Tyrannosaurus Rex arms. You don't want to reach for that next level. And that's a hard place to be in because if God is calling you to be the new creature in Him, then it causes you to have to step out the comfort zone and then do what's required. And then it's not going to be perfect necessarily, but God does require you to start taking some steps in that direction. And I firmly believe that if God has called you to something, that if you walk in that direction, then God is going to order your steps as you seek Him out and ask. The Bible talks about us asking, and with a pure heart and a pure conscience asking, and then God will honor that request and give us the information we need. Now, sometimes it's not always the whole thing. Sometimes it's just saying, okay, go over there. Like he told men in the Bible that He said, like Abraham, go to this place that you don't know. And Abraham could have said, well, you know what, you didn't tell me the whole story, so I'm going to just stay here until you come up with that. But no, he was obedient and he went that direction. And now we know Abraham to be who he is, within the context of believers in general. I mean, I mean, he's the father of many. You know, so many like that you can't even count them on the sand, the shore. You know what I'm saying? Like on
Blah,
the,
blah, blah, blah. But so the other part to this is you constantly have been saying the word fear, and fear is the absence of faith.
Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side are they.
Yeah.
And so
100%
I'm going to call my wife out on this because it was actually funny. We kind of had a similar conversation that started in the car earlier. And
Think she still have those track shoes?
probably. So we were talking about, or there was a thing on the radio, that's what it was. A thing on the radio, and she was talking about that it's good to not be safe. And essentially that you're supposed to take risk.
Yeah.
Take risk. Because you're stepping out in faith in those risks. Now, it should be calculated risk.
Right, yeah.
But risk nonetheless.
Yeah,
And
risk ain't just being stupid.
she's like, well, I was always taught that you should be safe, like blah, blah, blah. And I said, don't worry, babe. Like I take enough risk for all of us.
The whole family.
And the thing is my wife has not always been this super, and I don't mean to belittle any, but she's not always been this super like, let's step out on faith and trust that something's gonna happen.
Yeah,
and that
she's conservative thinking. She's like, you know what, if I just take a little step at a time, I'll still get there. Where the risk taker takes a big step.
And I'm a firm believer in taking appropriate steps. Now, sometimes God's gonna call you to take that like step out of the boat. Me personally, I'm gonna take the steps of, hey, where's life jacket?
That's me.
Hey, Jesus, hold on.
That's me.
You ain't going nowhere.
He's got to wet the fleece on other sides, make polka dots in areas that I didn't know. I'm gonna have all kinds of requirements, and just the stupid
Zebra
skeptic in
sheep.
me. Yeah, exactly.
And so she's not always been like that, but as our journey together and as I've made plenty of mistakes, as she's made plenty of mistakes, we have both learned on both sides of the coin, where she has learned to step out and trust more often than not.
Right.
And I've learned
To dial it back some.
to make calculated decisions, but still take those large leaps when called.
Yeah.
For instance, this ministry was one of those large leaps where at first it started with me downstairs in a room by myself, talking to myself, hoping that people would
That hasn't
watch.
changed.
And nothing's changed. Now I just have Henry with me. But we have stepped in this direction of ministry, and we've went down this road, and we have all these things that are kind of on the back burners that are to come, that are going to be huge steps
Right. Right.
when the moment is right.
And we've talked about that, how I'm the skeptical conservative one. I do make steps, but I make the steps almost that I'm comfortable with making. Like, put me on a motorcycle, I'll go 200 miles an hour, 2 wheels. Put me on that one wheel thing you got, no thanks. Have no parts of it. I'll take the step that I want to calculate.
Yeah.
So in a way, same way we kind of balance each other out, because you're more of a risk taker for sure than I am.
But see, and you're dialing into exactly what I'm talking about, is you're making a decision based off of your faith in yourself. And that's where the comfort comes in, is I have faith in myself that I can accomplish this. And there's a study that I want to do at some point, I think it's going to be after the new year. We're going to dive into a series of things that are taken out of context or misinterpreted by a lot of people, where, we've heard these our whole lives, but they're not really biblical. And the one
God
thing
helps those that help themselves.
right?
All the time.
All the time. But the one thing that you kind of said that makes a lot of sense right here is that God was only going to give you what you can handle, because that's the faith in me. So if I make these calculated steps, I can have the faith in me that I can accomplish this. In that phrase that we use so much in churches, that God's not going to give you more than you can handle. No.
Yeah.
It is the exact opposite. God will almost always give you more than you can handle, because the fact is you're not the one that should be handling it.
Right. That's the ultimate test of faith. If you give me something that say if you tell me and say, you know what, I want you to squat 400 pounds. I said, okay, throw them on a rack. But now if you tell me something I can't squat, then I'm going to have to rely on something outside of me to empower me to do so. And that's now me having faith that now under that load, somehow I'm going to be able to bear it. But if I constantly pick up the weight that I can pick up, that's not faith at all. That's the epitome of not having faith, because I know I can do that.
Now we'll use that analogy. Picture Jesus as your personal trainer.
Ooh, Lord.
You look at how Samson was.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, but picture Jesus as like your personal trainer, and say we want to use the analogy of like you lifting weight, squatting so many pounds. Say Jesus says, you know what, I want you to squat 800 pounds, but your max has been 400 this whole time.
Right, yeah.
And you're gonna be like, man, I can't do it.
That'd be the first thing I would say too. Like,
But
nope, can't do that.
Jesus is also going to say, you can't do it now. And he's not, because me and you both, if we try to lift 800 pounds, man,
Not even together.
our backs would go out. We'd probably tear something in our
Like
shoulders.
Mr. Potato Head, we just fall apart.
Our shoulders would probably get destroyed. All of these things would happen to us. But if Jesus was our personal trainer and he said, hey, you know what? I want you to lift 800 pounds, but I want you to start with 410. I'm gonna be the guy that's sitting there and helping. I'm gonna spot you for that extra 10. And then also now you're like, oh man, 410, personal best. And then he's like, all right, now that you've hit that, let's do 450. I'm gonna spot you. And he's gonna sit there and he's gonna protect you, and he's gonna make sure he's holding that weight, because you can't. But as you constantly are working that 450, he's letting off just a little bit. And then all of a sudden he's like, okay, now 500. And you constantly have, because he's constantly building us up, we still have to rely on him to spot us, because we can't hold 500 pounds on our own.
Right.
But as we exercise, as we build up in that faith, also now we can handle more.
Right.
And now that we can handle more is going to be required of us.
Yeah. And two, I think some people get lost in the fact of, they think that if the Lord said something, that they have nothing now to do. You still have to get under that 410 pounds to start the process. So God is spotting you, but you still have a part to play. So sometimes people use it as an excuse and say, well, you know what? God's just going to do it all.
Oh, God has called me to preach, but not right now.
Or God has called me to preach, but I'm never ever going to have to study the Bible. I'm never ever going to have to get prepared. I'm never have to do anything. I'm never have to test the lighting. I'm never have to do nothing, because God's just going to make it happen.
But that's what I'm talking about, is, so often we hear the words, or we've been called to a ministry, and say it's preaching, say you've been called a pastor or teach or whatever. And so often I feel that people sit back and they just kind of wait for, all right, well, until I get my credentials, I can't really do anything. Right. Because I'm not an official pastor. No.
I don't remember no official pastors in the Bible.
No, the fact of the matter is, okay, God has given you a direction. Use the resources around you. Use the pastors that you have. Use the leadership that you have. Use the people that you have to already start pouring into, because if God has already given you, start taking those steps. Now, don't step outside
Right.
of the bounds that God has you in,
There still is an order.
and don't be like, well, pastor, I've been called the pastor, so
Step aside.
you need to get out of my way. No,
I can sing too. Well,
please stop. Don't sing.
they be the
We
ladies
want-
in the pregnant. Oh,
We want people to watch this. They just turned it off. Now we might as well. All right, guys, have a great night.
they be having a little fan broken. They be fanning so hard. Oh, preach faster.
But that's a lot that goes into it. Is we feel like there's this new thing, and you either get. There's really three sides to this coin. There's the side where
That sound like a bad coin.
it is. There's the side where it's all the way to the left, where, okay, I've been called, and now that I've been called, man, I'm gonna dive head first.
Right.
And I'm gonna overstep my bounds. I'm gonna overstep my leadership. I'm gonna overstep of what the actual calling, because I feel that I am called. Versus,
Get ahead of your skis.
and then there's the other side of the coin where it's the timid portion of like, well, God hasn't told me to move yet, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to study. I'm not going to start writing sermons. I'm not going to get in prayer about this. I'm not going to talk to my leadership.
I've been called, but if God wanted, He gonna have to make it happen.
I'm not going to talk to my pastor to get the confirmation of the call, or even to get like a internship of starting that process of how to be a pastor. And then there's the third part of that coin, which is the part where we should be, and that is that we're doing these things, we're moving in the right direction, but we're not overstepping the process that God has laid out for us.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, we talked about this just in our own personal journeys. We've had many of these conversations that we have on Real Talk. They are real because it's a lot of stuff we have sidebars about, we talk about. And a lot of it is we sharpen each other by, for one, maybe even saying what's on our minds, because we have a relationship where we can just say what's on our minds, and it's an open forum. So we can do that. We can do it without judgment, and we can do it in a way that then maybe if I'm looking for confirmation, maybe if I'm looking to be sharpened, maybe if I'm looking to even be corrected, then there's a forum for that within us sidebar talking. And we've talked about like different facets of the ministry and where you have to be and not overstepping your bounds, because you know what? God has requirements for who can be a minister. And if you don't meet those requirements, though you may be called, it is not up to you to step past and bypass all of the requirements that God has put before you, because that's having order. And I think that you need to have a certain amount of order so that you can be successful in the ministry. So there are some things that we talked about and said, well, you know what? Well, this is a level where we can go with this facet of the ministry or that, because that's what God has allowed us to do. That's our allotment. Yeah. Myself, there's a certain distance I'll go. If somebody told me today, hey man, I want you to go pastor a church over in New Jersey somewhere, I'm going to turn it down immediately, because that is not within the purview of my allotment. So the thing is, though God has called you, there has to be a certain confine that you have to put yourself in and say, okay, well, you know what? If you light up that step, Lord, I'm going to go. So that's the obedience part of it, and that's the stepping out in faith part of it. If you light that step up, I'll step on it. But if you don't light it up, I'll stay here. And I'll do exactly what you told me to do right here.
Yeah, and so, some of Kyle 101 here.
Ooh, this is gonna be rough.
Like this, I'm already feeling the comments.
I'm waiting for lightning.
Is there a shocker on my? No. So this is Kyle 101. Take it for what it is. Argue it I am all willing. This is not anything that I am like 100% like this is what it is. But I am a firm believer, personally. If your finances are falling apart, I don't want you praying over my finances.
True that. That's true.
If your relationship is falling apart, I don't want you praying over my relationship.
It's almost like getting advice about,
Investments,
from a guy that's homeless, and or just, had this big thing, or it's, a guy telling you about car payments and he just had his car repoed. So it's like, maybe that's not the Lord can speak through a donkey, but he didn't speak through a broke donkey.
but so I'm like for instance, we had an individual that I got an encounter with where they didn't have any more to pour out into people. They kind of had walked away from the faith and just in a bad place in life, and I still love the individual to death. However, the conversation that happened a couple weeks after that was, hey, I want you here because I care about you, I love you, everything, but you need to be in a seat, not doing anything ministry.
In a mode of receiving.
You just need to receive and get poured into because you right now have nothing to pour out. And I am a firm believer of that, is if you get to a place where your life is just not right with God, it's time to just stop. I don't care who gets offended. I don't care who gets upset, because ultimately your relationship is more important to you than you trying to do all of this stuff that you're not doing any of it effectively.
Yeah. Because sometimes people think that God needs them
God don't
to
need you.
do something. Well, if I don't do it, it ain't going to get done because God needs me to do it. That's why I can't step aside. No.
Well, we talked about that the other week.
Sometimes you desperately need to stop, pump the brakes, and just figure it out. Because what if you're running with all your zeal, but you're running back to the starting line?
Yeah, and that circles us back to where we started with this, is you're a new creation. Guess what? Just because you're a new creation doesn't mean you haven't looked back at where you've been. Doesn't mean that you haven't stopped in your tracks and had to take a breather.
Yep. Phil, Sodom and Gomorrah, many of us would have already turned to salt. Many of us have already looked back on that thing and said, you know what? At least we had meat in Egypt, or we had this in Egypt. Now we're in the wilderness. But sometimes we don't even realize that the length of time we're in the wilderness is because of us. It's not because God wanted to punish us somehow. It's because we're we're stiff-necked. We're like the Israelites, like we just talked about last week.
We went over by the promised land and we were like, yeah, they're too big.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just take our eyes off of God in general, and we get lost.
Yep.
And sometimes we just need to stop, because even in the Chicago Marathon. So those of you that are watching, most of you probably already know we're from the Chicago area. But at the Chicago Marathon, they have medics at the 13K.
Yep. I run by them and slap the water out their hand.
And the reason why is because typically that is a place in a 26K, about halfway, is when people's lactic acid give out.
Yeah.
And they physically can't continue. Their muscles, everything just are done. And they have to get, there's a medic there to take care of them. And sometimes what we've what we've done as Christians is we've dove into something and we've taken it head on, and we didn't take the appropriate steps. And this is usually what happens or I feel this is what usually happens in ministerial burnout, is we don't take the appropriate steps because we're a Kyle, and we, instead of taking one step, we just took a leap. And
we got a broken leg.
And it should have been 3 or 4 steps to get there. And all of a sudden now you're burnt out because you've been working twice as hard when God was like, I wasn't ready for you that. Like you were still at 400 pounds. Why are you trying to push 5?
Right.
He's like, I was still like, we were working at 410 pounds. The 800 will come.
Yep.
You just need to be patient and allow the process to work.
Right.
And sometimes we forget about that process. And I feel that that's the individual that this took place with. I feel that that's essentially what happened is God had a process and a plan, but everybody else and all the other voices contributed to taking larger steps than what were necessary at the time, because the pouring in and the building up and the exercising of faith wasn't there.
And you know what, too, the Bible talks about counting the cost. So sometimes we take on something and we never sat down to say, you know what is this going to cost me? Yeah. And then now if I go back and I bring out the calculator, you know, the old thing.
Oh, I'm
dating myself.
I still use the
the abacus.
Yeah, that thing. Yeah. I forgot what it was
Yeah,
called.
I know, right?
That's why it was.
That was the chick thing. But you know, and the thing is, and I've made that mistake a bunch of times where, because I like to help, and maybe that's a gifting of mine, the gift of helps, so to speak. What I'll do is somebody will have something. Oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. I'll do that. And what I do is wind up spreading myself thin, like butter on a piece of bread. And there's never any real substance there, so I can't really be. And we talked about this too. I can't be a honing like a real master of my craft because everything is spread out so thin. And then what you wind up doing is you wind up burning out because you just don't have enough substance there to really hold you and solidify you to where you are. You don't have roots down into what you're doing because you haven't developed any. You're bopping all over the place, just volunteering to help do this, do that. Well, what if God didn't make you the ministry of music? You know, what if God didn't do that? What if God said, well, no, I just want you to make sure all the chairs are picked up at the end of service. And sometimes people don't think that. Sometimes God will give you a little task, like the talents, right? And we'll say, you know what, that little task, somebody else will do that. So we hide it in the sand. And then what God does is say, you know what, not only that large thing I have for you is going to be taken away, but even this one talent I gave you already is going to be taken away.
So there's a story that's been used, I'm sure, by tons of pastors, but I feel like it's relevant in this. I don't know if it's true or where the origin of it came. It may have came from an actual incident, and everybody just took it as a really great illustration and moved with it. But anyways, there's a story of this pastor who was going around and cleaning toilets. For whatever reason, he felt like that was a ministry that he needed to do. He was going to gas stations or whatever, and he was cleaning toilets. So he goes up to this truck stop, and this is one of the first ones he went to, and he goes up to the guy at the counter who was the owner, and he says, I would like to clean the bathrooms, and he's got his bucket with all his supplies. And the guy looked at him, and he said, why? And so the pastor's like, I'm a pastor, and I just feel like I want to bless people in the area. And he's like, okay. He's like, I got 20 bathrooms. Because the truck stopped.
Maybe I was called to the next truck stop.
So the pastor's like, Well, I was really thinking like 2. And the guy's like 20 or none. And he kind of called him out on it. He's like, you either clean them all or you don't clean any at all.
Yep.
And so, the pastor kind of sat there and he was conflicting with himself. And next thing you know, he's like, you know what? All right, where are they at? And he's like, well, you're in luck. I only have 2. He's like, but I wanted to know your true heart.
Right. Yeah.
And, that's a lot of us. Is even some of us have this, like, oh, I'll do the little stuff.
We talked about with Preston.
Right? I'll do the little stuff.
Yeah.
But then when the little stuff turns into a little bit more than what we were bargaining for, then it becomes, ooh, well, yeah, I know I said I'd do that, but I really meant I would do this. So, for instance, my son, Preston.
My boy. My buddy.
He wants to race RC cars. And a really good deal came along for a truck for him to race. And I said, you've had a lot of things handed to you. This time you're going to work for it. So you come up with the money and you can start racing as soon as you get it. And man, he went upstairs, he got dressed, he was ready to go. And he's like, let's go start knocking on doors, Dad. And he wanted to go and start raking people's lawns. And I'm like, buddy, like, not today. We literally just talked about this. Like, we need to figure out a plan of who we're gonna talk to, everything. So my in-laws say, you know what, Preston, I'll pay you to rake our yard. There is not very many leaves on the ground at this point.
No.
Not even a pile to jump in,
No.
a very small pile.
You'd have been hard pressed to make a pile.
Yep. And so he goes outside, he comes back in half hour later. And he says, that's a lot of hard work. And he's done. He doesn't want to do it. And I'm like, you wanted to go to somebody's house. I said, you would have embarrassed me by giving up and saying, oh, this is too hard. And all of a sudden now I have to rake this person's yard because
the obligation is there.
Because you agreed, you made a commitment. And I told him, I said, you have made a commitment. And I gave him a deadline. Because the argument kept coming that he'd go outside for a little bit and then he'd come back in and whine and whatever, that it wasn't,
So what
that it
happened
was
to that
too hard.
deadline?
So he didn't meet the deadline. And then he found out that, well, he should have met the deadline. Because not only did I make him rake that yard anyways, but I also made it to where he didn't get paid for it because he didn't meet the deadline.
Yeah. And in business, if you have a deadline to meet
You meet the deadline.
and you don't meet that deadline, you're not getting paid.
One of my biggest,
That's simple.
I would venture to say, in the top 5 biggest pet peeves, and I have a lot of pet peeves, but in the top 5 pet peeves, top 3 is,
5.
it's 3. It's definitely the top 3. Is if you tell somebody that you are going to do something, you do it. I understand situations come up. I understand the emergencies happen. But you do everything in your power to do.
It can't be you just blew it off.
Yes. And you have to have a reasonable reason to have blown it off.
My dog ate my homework.
Yeah, just like that. No. And
He's a vicious dog.
And that is one of my biggest things. And I have lost so many friends, and I have walked away from so many relationships in general, friendships and stuff, because of people that have said they were going to do something and didn't. And I just recently kind of threw my hands up in the air with one concerning that, where now it's not the relationship that it was or could have been. But I say all that because there's going to be times where we say things to God all the time. I mean, how many times
Oh,
how many times have we ever said, oh, God, if you get me out of this, I'll do this. God, if you show up here, I'll go to church on Sunday. God, if this
Write 7 books about
if
that.
this happens, God, I won't ever touch pork again. You know, we go
Next thing you're looking for the Tony Saturated. Season them up.
and we do all these things for God. Sometimes the calling that God has for you in the moment might not be glamorous. It might not be your pick of the crop. It might not be preaching on a TV station with hundreds of thousands of people looking at you and cheering your name.
It might just be go clean those 2 toilets.
It might be you're talking to a camera in a church, real talk,
With a guy you don't know.
with a guy you barely know, and the only people that watch are your parents. That might be it.
Yeah.
And if
But if you're
it-
not, if you're not willing to do that,
if you're not
then how
faithful,
can I trust you with this?
yes,
If you're not willing to do that, and so don't miss what we're saying. We're saying that even if you're called to something, don't dismiss the call. But there is a starting point, just like when you start in a race as being a new believer. There's a starting point. So don't dismiss the little things that God has told you to do along the way, because those things set you up and put you in a place where if you can be faithful over that, then God can entrust you with much. So we want to be those that have the 5 talents, and we go back to the Lord and say, look, Lord, you gave me 5 talents, but I've made 10. And so when you can do that, the Lord can entrust you with so much. And I think the reluctance sometimes is, for one, you're not going to count the cost to understand what it's going to take.
Yeah.
Number 2, sometimes we just aren't willing to step out because of fear, because of our own self-sufficiency, whatever it might be. And the other thing is sometimes we're listening to the other voices that say, oh, you should never do that. You're never going to be that. You're never going to be good enough to do that. And sometimes that's the past old voices, and what they do is they grab you and they hold you back. So sometimes, like relationships, you have to make a sever, and you have to cut that relationship off, because if I've been called to do this, then I can't go out to the club with you. If I've been called to do this, you know what? We used to chase women together. We're no longer doing that, because I've been called to something. I'm now supposed to be set apart. So that's the other side of it, is all of the grandiose things that God has for us, but we have to be willing to sever some ties and some relationships, sever some things. And I think sometimes we're reluctant to do so. And I cannot look at you with any ill will, because that's me. That's all of us, to a point that though we understand that God has a calling or a direction for us to go in, and he's standing at the finish line, and sometimes we can even see it. But because of those things drawing and pulling us back, we're reluctant to do so. And so all I can do is that if we have to exercise what Kyle said before is, and he was kind of giving an analogy, and that's kind of me, it's like, I'll jump ahead and do something if I know I can possibly do it. But, sometimes it's just that, I personally have to get past that and understand that if God has called me to something, I just got to start going.
So I think this is where we're going to end it this week. If you are new to this and you are that new creation, just take steps forward. Don't stop moving. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest advice that I guess I would like to leave is, don't quit.
Yeah.
There's going to be times where you fall back on things. Mm-hmm. Just keep pressing forward. Even if you slide back, press. Because the worst thing that you could possibly do is become stagnant. Mm-hmm. And little steps are better than jumping too far and falling all the way back or all the way off.
Or not taking steps at all.
Mm-hmm. And, if you've been in your relationship with God for a while now, and you're a seasoned Christian, so to speak, don't forget where you started and continue to press forward. Again, don't become stagnant just because you've been in it for so long. Don't get comfortable where you're at. Always press, always exercise, always build for forward momentum.
Yeah. And that, you're right, that plays into the person that's been a believer for a while. Sometimes you just might need to even change the seat you sit in at church, just so that you can get yourself to keep being in that mode of ever progressing, meeting some new people.
Because they call them pews for a reason. Because they start to smell like you, because you've been in that seat for way too long. So with that being said, we appreciate it if you like, share, subscribe. Again, December 1st, look for a drop. It's exciting news. I think it's exciting. And if you'd like to give, please visit our Facebook page. There are giving instructions on that is a pinned comment on the top. And other than that, like, share, subscribe, and as always, until next time.